Welcome to Bloom State Radio. This is episode number 7. And number 7 this month is a continuum of my previous episode, which was a snippet of my experience from Maiden to Mother. These two very beautiful, powerful archetypes that every single woman embodies. And at some point, every single woman needs to, and I'm going to say need, because it is a necessity in order to transition into a healthy role model. And transitioning between Maiden and Mother is a beautiful yet really challenging experience if you don't have a facilitator that knows how to assist you into that integrative point of archetypal shift. And I personally didn't have a quote unquote mentor or somebody to, help me with that transition. I just felt an intuitive move that started to shift between these two archetypes. Now, the Maiden energy, just for some context, is, very free-spirited, strong in a sexual energy, kind of fuck about, find out kind of ethos, but there does get to a point in life where it's like, babes, we need to start maturing this up a little bit. That kind of energy definitely has a place in a woman's life. And that's usually, in my opinion, like mostly acceptable in your 20s, maybe getting to about mid-20s. But from around mid-20s, I personally feel that it's a necessity to start shaping your reality that's going to be of benefit to your ascension into your older age. And I say ascension because there's nothing degrading or lowering as you step into the later years of womanhood. Because what I know to be true as well is that every single year that we live, every single day, month, year, that we get to grace our presence with the earth, or the earth with our presence, we carry with that an undeniable amount of wealth of knowledge, wisdom, hopefully, and another year of life learning. And this is what I know to be true in that integrative piece between Maiden and Mother, where there's still like a kind of grasping onto fuck about, find out, let's just wing it. And I don't think there's anything wrong with having a wing it attitude depending on what the circumstances are. But as we know, as we move through life and we start to experience more challenging experiences, that does require a level of leveling up. And that's kind of what this is. And it's not to say that fun, free spirit, maiden energy can't still have a place in our multifaceted, multidimensional realities. But there does come to a point where it's now time to soften those edges and actually embody sensuality as a woman, a womb holder, a mother, and learn how to step through life in a more dignified sort of way. And there's nuance to this, obviously, and the way that women move, like, I have no right to say how a woman should be moving through life, but I do have opinions, which I'm entitled to, and I am very observant, and I do see certain behaviours from older women where I'm like, couldn't be me, and call that judgy all you want, but we are observational beings, most of us, and I personally don't feel inspired by older women who are still taking lots of drugs and partying every weekend, fucking loads of random local community dick, posting pure nakies on socials, pure nakies that are deeply rooted in sexual energy, opposed to that more grounded, contained, sensual energy. But I do hold a level of empathy there, because there is that transitionary piece that so many women are missing. And it all comes down to discipline, in my opinion, and experience. Disciplined enough to know that where I'm leading, am I leading from a place of XYZ, fill in the blanks of what that might look like for you as a woman who's carefree, quote unquote free spirit. I personally don't want to be a free spirit. Like, nothing comes free around here unless you're in my close circle and it's from the heart. Therefore, it's a conscious privilege for me to share my spirit with somebody. But once upon a time, I loved being embodied as a free spirit, open book, la la la. But they soon start to realize there's a level of depletion that comes from that. And when we as women start to carry life, if the lights don't come on and that deeper sense of self-awareness doesn't bring light to that scattered energy, which, do you know what? At some point in your life, you just got to scatter it and see, fuck about, find out, exactly like I said, Maiden energy. That actually redirecting that energy into something more intentional, like the growing and nurturing of a baby inside your body, like the opportunity to reparent yourself when the emotions of that transition start to rise. Like, yes, women are emotional beings. All beings are emotional beings. Let's not get that bit twisted. We all just express it in different ways. We all know how to contain it in different ways. But all you pregnant women out there, if you're listening, or mamas that are, or to be mamas, it's a good educational piece, I feel, to share how important that it is to redirect that energy back into the body, back into your own system, psyche, and to reparent yourself. Because if we've grown up in dynamics that have been toxic, abusive, just generally degrading and denurturing, or devalued of any sort of nurture, neglectful, lots of babies who have come from 80s, 90s and previous to that, our parenting was not quite how these beautiful star seeds are being nurtured today. However, there's medicine in that we can feed back into our children. And that comes in that form of reparenting, like really taking a look at the footing that we've received in life. All is divine. We have to remember that as well. And whilst there's nuance in that victim consciousness, ultimately the way that we were raised when we were dependent, that wasn't our fault. And there's a big piece on that when it comes to reparenting ourselves. Now, we can't reverse all damage because there's blind spots and we don't truly know the extent of the harm that took place to us. If we were in utero, we still receive our mother's emotional turbulence and cortisol spikes and all the things. But when we take that conscious decision to center ourselves as much as possible and get ourselves grounded in our new direction as being a mother, and for the men out there listening, being a dad, it does take a lot of discipline, awareness, compassion as a massive one, and the bandwidth to be a fucking hot mess, mama. Because this is the first time that we as a generation really, on a collective level, are all starting to muck in and do our messy shit so that our children don't receive what we received. Hopefully that's what you're doing, because we don't need another generation of wounded, really hurt and fragile people. Again, there's nuance in that because there's actually a level of resilience that comes from doing that work of reparenting and being homeless and, all of the crazy shit that no child should really have to go through. We have a decision as we step into that intentional mother archetype. where we want to be the best version of ourselves whilst also demonstrating what it means to be human to our child. And that devotional aspect doesn't just start from conception, it goes beyond, all the way through to the current day. And just following on from my previous episode where I spoke out on breastfeeding, and this is a continuation of that podcast where I wanted just to share a bit more about my devotion in breastfeeding, clinical pressures for vaccines, and if I've got a bit time for more, that integration piece from a dual parentship to independent mothering. So, see what wants to flow through and how much time I've got to cover these topics. But I just want to move in the realms of breastfeeding. So, as soon as my daughter was born, she latched on no problem. The birth was beautiful, no tears. Like, my body just knew how to do this. And without drugs, she came so beautifully. She latched on, no problem. She took a full 40-minute feed straight from birth. I was not aware that babies needed to be burped, so, which is also crazy, isn't it? That's not an education piece when you're in a clinical environment. There's only so much research I can do on my own, which is, a lot of this majority. In fact, all of it was on me. And I put everything that I possibly could into, keeping my body, my mind, my emotions and spirit healthy during that pregnancy. She popped out, birth, beautiful. But I was very uneducated about the next steps of motherhood. I was like, okay, baby's born now what? So I just moved very intuitively, but I didn't do that much research in terms of how to breastfeed. She latched on and away we went. And she was very unsettled because she had a lot of wind, and I've moved through that sort of guilt of not knowing how to burp her and knowing what the importance of that is. But we live, we learn. I was juvenile and I didn't have the capacity to even research what the fuck was going on, if I'm being honest. I was just in it. The first 3 months of childbirth, delivery is definitely the hardest, and any woman will tell you that. And I did it all on my own. Party popper. I'll celebrate myself. But it was quite depressing. So the party pooper part is actually still relevant. It felt like I was in a whirlwind of sleep deprivation. Hormones were all over the place. I lived out in the sticks with no phone signal, no Wi-Fi. Very few people actually wanted to come around after the first 2 weeks of her being born. Novelty sort of worn off. Most mothers will agree with this. And I had the task of caring and nurturing a newborn baby, while managing a house, the bills, the shopping, the everything. So naturally, that's going to take its toll on any new mother, newborn baby. But we moved through it, and the thick of it passed. But what I fell into after 6 months of breastfeeding was, this is actually too much for me. But formula was not an option. I did not want my child to receive a synthetic formula that my breasts could make. So I persevered, and I say persevered because it was a challenge. She was latching on fine, no problem. Milk supply was lit, all the things. I just didn't have the support that I needed to keep myself mentally well, emotionally well. But despite that, I did it. And I just reflect back sometimes and think, fuck, your divine guidance is what kept you fueled and sustained. And I'm deeply grateful for that, because I've always had that connection with source, with spirit world. And I tapped into that frequency many times, and I felt the loving embrace and the presence of my spirit team. And I know that that was my fuel and my faith to keep going, because I was deeply rooted in keeping clinical out of the picture, including aftercare, quote unquote, aftercare checkups, and the health visitor coming round. I just knew based on stories that this health visitor was just going to keep trying to push vaccines and bottles and dummies and all the things to ease it and la 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 la. But I still knew that even though I was mentally and emotionally wobbly, that I was a fuck no for all of that, which is why I continued and persevered as strongly as I did. And with the vaccine piece, I was receiving letters through the post, or, booking me in to have these vaccines administered. So the first one came through the post, and I thought, you've booked me an appointment without my consent, number one. So there's an expectation that I have to follow this protocol. Not today, babe. So I rang them. I received the letter. Okay. So I was polite. I'm like, look, I'm grateful for this. I'm grateful for the opportunity to have a health visitor. But I personally feel that I just want to be with my newborn baby right now. And I'm aware of your services should I need any help. So I made them aware of that on the first call. And then another letter would come through, booking me in for more vaccines. And then there'd be another letter booking me in for health visitor, booked in, should I say. And I just continued to move in this game. I was like, look, I've already said my child's not getting vaccinated. I don't need a health visitor. If I do need a health visitor, then I will be in touch to let you know, but I appreciate your offering. And then another letter came through. I think there must have been about 8 or 9 until it got to a point that I rang them again and said, I'm finding this very harassing and I'd just like to be left alone. I'm opting not to vaccinate my child. Can you put a note on your system? I do not wish to be bothered. And I got relatively assertive, quite rightly so. But it also shone that light of how many other vulnerable women are just going ahead with this because this is what is expected of them. And whilst I was in that pinnacle low point of, I'm going to say depression, because I was depressed, I felt powerless, I felt there was no way out. Even though I was at that pit, the strength of my spirit was still very much alive. And I don't move in accordance with the conveyor belt system. And that's deeply rooted in my DNA, clearly, because even at that point of being so low, like the lowest point of my life, I still didn't conform. And I know that I won't conform to any of these clinical, quote unquote, standards that try to pressurize me and community, society, collectively, these doses of poison that numb us and dumb us and restrict us away from being our full potential. Not today, honey. So it was always a full fuck no. And I went in with that as a full fuck no. I knew that there was no way my child is ever going to receive a vaccine, ever. And even to this day, when it's vaccine rollout day, I pull her out of school, even though I've not given them consent to administer anything. My daughter is completely aware of these rollouts that happen in school, and she's not to conform to any needles injected into her body or any vaccines that are injected up her nose, because there's a new snuff flu vaccine that is that gets rolled out, and there's actually one being rolled out next week, which I'm pulling her out of school for that day, because once that thing is in, it can't be removed, should we say. I think there's a process that we can support our body to become strong based on the damage that it causes. But I don't know. I don't think that these things are irreversible. Potentially, I don't know. But I'm not going to risk it. And I do not want my child to have that mixed up in her system. So I know I'm not the only one. And I know that there is a small proportion of people in our society that do not conform to these rules either. And I'm praying that one day said humans are going to link up and create another species of babies that will never have a vaccine. Can you imagine like how powerful this new earth human is going to be when they procreate with another human that's never received a vaccine in its life? It's powerful stuff. But I believe that we're birthing these babies and we're stepping into these spaces of sovereignty, inner sovereignty, first and foremost, to continue to allow the human race, our species, to evolve. And with the COVID vaccine, I feel like that has taken away a lot of the human DNA that is necessary for the new earth to continue to be rebuilt. I think there's an element of these vaccinated people who have regretted it and are taking a stand and sharing their recovery and all the things, which is amazing. But ultimately, I don't want my child to be getting to a point where they have to recover from something because of miseducation and because they're too weak to not conform. So that's the vibe. And I want my child to be strong-minded, strong-willed, and know how to say no, exactly like her mama. So, vaccines. It's always been a fuck no. And even when we'd be going into medical spaces, particularly after COVID stuff, if there was no vaccine listed on file, every single doctor would grill me, has she been vaccinated? No. And particularly during the COVID times, like fresh after, the energy would be repulsed. They would actually put us both in a separate room because they didn't want us to be like contaminating other people. Very, very bizarre. But anyway, I saw it as a privilege that we got to have special treatment because that's what it was. We'd be put into a separate room and we'd be seen to immediately, whilst it was very intense with like the people seeing us with masks and gloves and full aprons and blooming white suits. It was fucking bizarre. But that was the time then, and the time now is that there's so much light that's been shone on how actually very dangerous these vaccines can be. So with that in mind, I didn't receive any vaccines during my pregnancy, which meant that my milk source that went through to her was pure. And I moved through breastfeeding up until she was 3 years old. I actually wanted to quit about 6 months. I went for another 6 months. I wanted to quit when she was 1. She wasn't having any of it. And then 18 months, I separated with her dad. And I did not want to take away a source of comfort for her while we were both moving through a transition of dual parenting to single parenting. And I'm glad that I made that decision because, our children are energy sensitive to what's happening in our nervous system and the stress that we move through and carry. And if I can be an additional form of comfort for her, then, I'm devoted to her well-being and her future. And it felt like the right thing to do to continue. So I did. And on her 3rd birthday, we had a bye-bye booby party where there was a cake and all the things, and we said goodbye, and she understood it. But for about a year after that, and occasionally now, and she's 6, she will reach for my boob for comfort, as in just to put her hand on there. And she gets a great deal of comfort just from putting her hand on there. And I do allow it sometimes, but there's a thing that not a lot of women speak out about, and that's feeling touched out. If you're breastfeeding, consecutively breastfeeding, which means no bottles, no dummies, there is a very high chance that being attached to your baby for long, long periods will induce a feeling of just being touched out and not wanting to be touched. So I'm conscious that I have reclaimed my body sovereignty after I've shared that with my daughter for such a long time. And it's a beautiful place to be in that reclamation space of, I have offered my body to you and now it's time for it to be mine. But I still love you. I still want to be around you. We have endless hugs. I never stop comfort in that respect. But, the breasts are a very sensitive area. And I didn't understand how sensitive that they were until I breastfed and then stopped breastfeeding. But to close this episode out, I just want to say that if you are moving through the thick of breastfeeding and you want to quit, I get that. And if it is to support your mental health and you have support around you, then do what you feel is necessary and right for you. If that means getting a dummy in a bottle, do it. You've got nothing to prove to anyone, and your mental and emotional health is of your utmost priority, because you can't give to your child, or you can, but it's diluted if you are burnt out, overwhelmed, depressed, and just low energy. But if you are in that space and you still want to be devotional, then what I would recommend is that you get yourself out in nature as much as possible, because that is an infinite refuel source that certainly helped me. Anytime that I was sort of dipping into those low depressive states, I would be out in nature. I would, we've got food on the go, babe. She can go on the nipple, no problem. And if I can sit by a river and feed and receive the nurture from that unconditional love of nature around me, that is my fuel. And it has been massively eye-opening for me in this healing 360-degree turn of recovery, of how powerful and potent that it is to be around the nature spirits and the spirit of and the connection with our spirit team, which is always at hand and is always feeding through to us. And whilst that transition between maiden and mother is also crunchy as fuck, and it's also a tool to strengthen and navigate yourself as a woman moving in the world, and also as a mother as well. So bringing that integrative piece in is super, super potent, important and powerful. And I believe that if you start that process while you're pregnant, when you hit the newborn days, the first 3 months, the likelihood of becoming depressed is going to be relatively low, depending on what your circumstances are. But if we can detach and let go of that version of ourselves that was before being a mother, and step forth intentionally and do our work to be like, no, I want to be a good example for you. And no matter what happens in terms of my mental, emotional, spiritual, whatever health, I'm here and I'm devoted to you. And that devotion and that faith and that hope will keep you locked in and loaded and focused on the journey ahead. And this journey, it doesn't end, does it? We're just met with different circumstances that might try and deviate us away from our path, might distract us from the actual direction that we're going. But if you're going into this with your fuck no's and your fuck yeses, then the sway of those depressive states when life is hard, not just in early motherhood, but just in general, if you can really be with that head on, still do an amazing job as a mom, then you can do fucking anything, trust me. Like the reflection piece here on my own experience from that maiden to mother transition, the depression as an early mom, all those things. My daughter now is vibrant and healthy and happy and loving and caring and spicy and sassy and, all the things that I want for her. She knows how to say no. She knows how to say no in the system as well, because she told me that she says no to the head teacher when she asks her to do something that seems like it's just a silly thing to do. And I celebrate that. I celebrate that she knows how to say no, and she's not being a deviant little bitch. She's being a fucking human. And we're moving around different times now where these schooling systems are going to take a different turn with AI coming into the mixer. And there's a lot of change happening in the world right now. And we need to be preparing our kids on how to stand in the face of pressure, societal pressure, peer pressure, and to claim their sovereignty as the beings that they were born to be. And there is no time that's too late to do this, by the way. We can teach our children at any point of age, because we can teach ourselves this. We can embody this and we can live it and then we can breathe it ourselves at any point of our life. We can have an awakening any moment, and that's basically what that is. An awakening to the true reality of what's happening here for us and around us. And I've said it many times in my podcast, and if you've listened to everyone up until this point, I'm going to say it again. We, as multidimensional, multifaceted beings, are way beyond what words can even comprehend. When someone wants to try and put a label on us, when someone wants to try to dictate the way that we should behave, the way that we should live, and it's not in accordance with our own values, that's control. That's someone trying to oppress us. But actually, the beings that we were born to be are unbelievably powerful, strong, reconstructive, and we can shape the future of our direction at any given moment. And the same with our children too. We can connect with them. We can pour into them. We can be present with them. If you feel like you've been a bit of a shitty parent, own it. Own it and speak to your kid about it. There's no time that's too late to do this. Whether you're a grown parent and you've got older kids, make the decision to connect. Power, presence, warmth. Thank you so much for listening. That was a fun one to record.